Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am going to show you how I can go about using different colours of embossing powders on the same project. Now I will say that I don't generally carry a lot of embossing powder colours. I don't carry reds or greens or those actual colours. I just carry the kind of ones like these, so like silver, gold, white, clear, maybe a couple of sparkle ones, maybe. I don't even know what I have. I don't have many at all, and I like it that way because if I want a coloured something coloured, then I stamp it in a pigment ink and then I emboss with clear embossing powder over top, and that means that I don't have to store a whole lot of embossing powders. However, with the ones that I do use, I'm going to create a fun look today using multiple colours of the embossing powders. So I'm starting off my project here today and I am using this stamp set, which is called Text Background, and I'm just holding on to the stamp just so I can get little bits of the text all over my craft piece of cardstock. Then I'm going to take the exact same vintage photo distress oxide ink. Of course, you could use any inks, you could use pigment inks, you could use dye inks, hybrid inks, anything is going to work fine here because they're not for a special reason. I'm just adding a little bit of interest into the background, and then I'm adding a little bit of shading there to the borders and things. This piece of cardstock I have, I think it's about 3.5 inches by 5.5. Means that the two sides are going to be shorter on my card base. I didn't necessarily measure, it was a piece of scrap cardstock that I decided would work well for my project, so I dove straight into it. This one here is the Leaf Clusters stamp set from Altenew. And I'm going to pop my piece down on my sticky grid mat. I have all of these things linked down in my description box below. I'm using my stamping platform today and getting out 4 of these stamps that I'm going to use. Obviously, the techniques that I'm using today can be used with any style of card, whether it be vintage or bright and sparkly or anything at all. This could be Christmassy. You could use this with any kinds of stamps. Foliage just works really well because it's so easy and it goes with so many different occasions and things for sentiments when it comes to popping sentiments on them. So that is why I usually lean towards these. I have got these all set out in exactly where I want them to go. I did all 4 at once, although you don't have to do it that way. You could do it one at a time. I use my anti-static powder bag on my little piece of cardstock so that the embossing powder is not going to cling anywhere that I don't want it to. I'm using some Versamark sticky embossing ink, and I am going to use the Versamark one because I have tried many embossing inks, and heat embossing can be a frustrating process if it doesn't go well. If the ink is too dry or too splotchy, then the embossing powders aren't going to adhere well to it. If it needs to be re-inked, then it's not going to work well. If you already have other wet products on your piece, then it's going to stick and cling to all of those, and that will make a hot mess as well. So I will do anything to kind of reduce the stress, and I have found that using the Versamark ink pad, and I would recommend getting the Versamark re-inkers as well, and that one does mean that my heat embossing goes pretty smoothly. That and the anti-static powder bag, along with a juicy, but not too juicy, but juicy enough sticky embossing ink, are going to be a good recipe for successful heat embossing. Now, I embossed the top one in the gold. Of course, you could do kind of 50-50 colors, but I always find like I'm going to waste embossing powder because with the little 2 bits that kind of get mixed together, I don't want to put that back in the jar. So I don't like the idea of wasting it. So I pretty much just stick to each image being a different color. But I have gold up the top, and then I'm going to use white. This embossing powder is really nice and bright white, and that is one of the things that I like about this one. And then for the bottom, I want to do black heat embossing, and this is what I was talking about. I don't have black embossing powder because that stuff is notorious for getting absolutely everywhere. So instead, just like I said, I use a pigment ink. Instead of using Versamark, I'm going to use the VersaFine Onyx black ink, which is a pigment ink, and it is going to stamp beautifully down on top of my project, And that way Pigment inks, because the pigment sits on top of the paper, it means that it's going to stay wet for a little bit longer, and I have that time where I'm able to add the clear embossing powder, and it is going to stick really nicely to my project exactly where I stamped and nowhere else. And then once I heat emboss this, you're going to see it turn into a beautiful, really solid black color. So I have all 3 different colors on here. This is a very, very simple project, but really, really fun, and you could recreate this using lots of different images or anything that you have in your stash at home. Now this is the Elliptical ovals die cutting set. There are 6 different ovals in this set, and they just have a really nice decorative edge, so I did die cut out a couple of those. Then I have a border die here. These are not matching, but they were as close to matching as I could find in my stash, and all I'm going to do is take that piece of paper that I die cut the ovals out of, and I'm going to run this up and down that sheet twice, and I will use these as well. Any border that you have is going to work really nicely. Even something like doing this in vellum would look really lovely. Even using some fabric or some lace, some trims would look really, really nice coming out of the edges. Have a look through your stash and see what you can find to kind of make this work for you, but this is just what I had in my stash. I'm going to cut this down the middle so that I'm able to put it on both sides of my project. As for the sentiment, I am just going to go through my stash and find one that I really like the look of. This one is the leaf canopy. These 2 stamp sets are definitely my favourite. The leaf clusters and the leaf canopy have been my go-tos over our winter here in New Zealand. I have loved using these. I purchased them both and I definitely do not regret it. I have used these in so many videos. If you go back through the videos on my channel, you will find plenty using these. They are absolute favourites of mine, and I did, instead of cutting the stamp in half there, I did use a little bit of mint tape, and I masked off the word you in the thank you sentiment, and then popped it down into the ink, and then made sure I took off that little mask so I could stamp it down separately, so they ended up stacked instead of side by side. And then I added that little tiny sub sentiment down the bottom, which also came in that set. I did want this to be a tiny little bit slimmer when I popped it down with my little edge pieces there. So I just cut them off the edge, and then I'm quickly going to go back over it with that brown ink. If you get any brown ink on top of your heat embossing, remember that that is just going to wipe off really easily because it is all embossed. And then from here, it's just a matter of kind of putting everything together. As I said, this was a really simple card to create, but so much fun. And it's really fun to include different colors of heat embossing on the same project. So I'm going to pop 2 pieces of double-sided tape down the sides, take off the release paper, and this is how I'm going to attach my little pieces of decorative edge that are going to go down the side. As I said, there are so many different things that you are able to use for this part of your project. And I did want these ones here to be nice and lying down flat. I didn't want to put foam tape behind these ones. You definitely could, but I knew I wanted to put another layer of foam tape behind this so that I could lift this off the page a little bit, because those extra little decorations running down the side are going to be white upon white with the background. So lifting it off the page a little bit and giving it a little bit of dimension allows it to be seen just that little bit more. It's not meant to kind of stand out. Obviously the heat embossing in the middle panel is the standout part, but these are just those gorgeous little details that you can add down the sides or anywhere. You could also just have some foliage sticking out of the sides. As I said, so many different options. So I'm adding a little bit of foam tape to the back here, and if you would like to, you could use kids fun foam, you can use foam squares, foam dots, you could just layer up different pieces of cardstock to get the dimension and the height that you need. So anything is going to work well. If you need a little bit of dimension, use what you have. And I'm going to pop this down onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. And then with the sentiment that we stamped there, I am also going to pop a little bit of foam tape on the back of that one. And then I'm kind of going to like offset it a little bit. And it just kind of felt like a good place for it to go. But this was a really, really fun project. I love the look of the gold, the white, and the black embossing all on one card. And who says that you can't add more than one color to each project? So I hope that you have enjoyed this one today. I had a really fun time. If you were inspired by this card, or you kind of wanted to give this a go using multiple colors of embossing powders, then a great place to show me would be over on our Facebook group. That way you can post photos of your creations and your projects. I will leave a link to that Facebook group in the description box below this video as well. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!